Over the past few months, you've probably heard about the Amazing Digital Circus. At first glance, the show seems like your pretty standard kids show, teeming with vibrant, colorful set pieces and characters. A show where each episode is a new adventure with your favorite cast of characters. But wait, it's not like that, is it? While the Amazing Digital Circus may initially appear like a show to be enjoyed by all ages, the first 2 episodes hinted that there are dark secrets buried right beneath the surface of this digital world. Hi, I'm Danger Ice, and if you've seen my shorts, you may have noticed I'm a pretty big fan of the show. As I've been researching everything there is to know about the Amazing Digital Circus over the past few months, I discovered a deep rabbit hole that might just answer the questions of how the Amazing Digital Circus was created, who's behind the creation of the Amazing Digital Circus, what Abstraction really is, and the true fate of the characters in the Amazing Digital Circus. Now be warned, this is a long one, so get cozy. And without further ado, I welcome you to the incredibly dark and depressing Digital Circus. Before we really get to the bottom of this mystery, there are a couple of things we need to establish. First of all, Gooseworks and Glitch Productions are independent creators. The founders of Glitch, Kevin and Luke Laird-Witchigal, are the creators of the SMG4 YouTube channel and are artists at heart. They had big goals, but they knew they couldn't realistically make their dreams a reality unless they started their own independent studio. So they founded Glitch Productions. As Luke and Kevin have aptly stated, Glitch is an independent animation studio which we have founded with one main goal: to make unique animated shows and tell stories that could never have existed in the Western world without independently funded animation. And second of all, Glitch isn't a massive company, but its creators and showrunners have all been working in the animation space for years. They're familiar with the corporate landscape and how they treat their animated shows and movies. That being said, there is one other giant gummy elephant in the room that I feel needs to be addressed. AI. Artificial intelligence has recently conquered the cultural zeitgeist, and for good reason. Its possibilities seem nearly endless, but businesses have been presenting it in a way that transforms the expression AI is concerning into a serious understatement. And with models created by Midjourney, OpenAI, 11 Labs, and countless other companies being updated every day, it's clear that AI is only improving its ability to generate art, write scripts, mimic voices, and even compose music. And with these innovations, virtually every creative job is at risk. And considering that the costs associated with developing series and movies have only increased over time, the implementation of AI by major studios is inevitable. Even with the bleak direction that the animation industry is heading, events like Glitch X demonstrated that the creators in the independent animation space can and are making a difference. With all of that in mind, and AI being a topic that's constantly on the mind of creative people, I don't think that it's a coincidence that Kane is an AI being. On the contrary, I believe that his inclusion is fundamental to the overarching story of the Amazing Digital Circus, because I believe that the story of the Amazing Digital Circus is an analogy for the effect of AI on the animation industry, one that highlights corporate greed and takes a closer look at the awful, unforgivable lengths corporations are willing to go to in the pursuit of making a profit. I'd like to give one last notice before getting into the theory. Gooseworks, the creator of the Amazing Digital Circus, has stated that she lies for fun sometimes. Since I'll be using her statements from social media as one of my main sources for this theory, please be wary of this. I did my best to discern truth from satire and untruth, but if it isn't something that's been confirmed in the show, please take it with a grain of salt. However, please also keep in mind that Gooseworks has stated that she's pretty selective in which questions she responds to, even though she sees all of them. A lot of her answers have had direct ties to events that happened in the first 2 episodes. The Amazing Digital Circus follows the story of 6 humans who become trapped in the digital world with a practically endless cast of artificially intelligent beings. Kane is the ringmaster in the digital circus, and he created the other AI beings that reside in the digital world. In each episode, Kane creates an adventure for the humans to participate in. The humans of the digital world are Gangle, Zubul, Kinger, Ragatha, Jax, and Pomni. We learn at the beginning of the show that the characters all arrived shortly after putting on a headset. A Apart from the moment they put on the headset, they don't remember their names. However, they retain their personalities, insecurities, and quirks. When a new character arrives, Kane recognizes them as a human and gets them acquainted with the digital world. The humans in the digital circus can use foul language, but this language is censored using fun sounds and a wacky censor bar. We know that the human characters can abstract, which happens when they lose their mind. When characters abstract, they transform into towering, black creatures with 4 legs, an elongated neck, and numerous eyes. When Kane finds these creatures, he seals them in the vast, black abyss in the cellar of the circus tent. We know many characters have already abstracted in the digital world, as numerous character portraits have been crossed out on their doors, and there are tons of abstracted creatures being held in the cellar of the circus. We also know that characters cannot die or be hurt by traditional methods, as Ragatha takes a butcher knife to the head, but she's fine after pulling it out. Pomni is also pierced by 5 knives to the body, but the majority of her suffering is emotional and psychological. However, contact with abstracted creatures can cause characters' code to get jumbled up, which makes them feel pain. We know that Kane and Bubble are artificially intelligent beings, with Kane possessing the power to do nearly anything except control or read the minds of human characters in the Amazing Digital Circus. During the in-house adventure to gather the Gloinks, we saw that Kane can create less complex AI characters in the digital world and assets to fill it. He has eyes everywhere, so he can be aware of what's happening in the digital circus at all times. We know that Kane has been creating an area that's supposed to act as an exit from the Amazing Digital Circus due to the humans' request for one. An exit that just so happens to contain an office with a company logo for C&A. We also know that the world has product placement, as Kane's Wacky Watch activates in tandem with a TV ad that advertises it as a purchasable product. We know that the digital circus has a licensing agreement, which prohibits humans from choosing names that could be considered profane, sexually explicit, libelous, slanderous, or defamatory. We know that characters cannot feel hungry or eat in the traditional sense in the digital world. While we don't know much about the Void, we do know that it resides on the edge of the digital circus. It's also where the other side of the exit door leads during the pilot. Now, I've seen a lot of speculation surrounding the format of the Amazing Digital Circus. Is it a video game world? Is it a TV show? Or are the characters simply inhabiting cyberspace? While all of these could be valid answers, and the aesthetic is definitely inspired by games of the 90s and early 2000s, the context given to us within the pilot episode points to it being a show. Unlike a game, the characters in the Amazing Digital Circus are able to move autonomously. No player is moving the characters or making decisions for them, and since Kane is an AI, it wouldn't really make sense for him to be a playable character. Additionally, every adventure in the Amazing Digital Circus is episodic in nature, with each new adventure spanning the duration of an episode. The pilot episode also starts with a theme song, which is typical in most animated TV shows, and during the cafe scene where Kane is alerted by his Wacky Watch, an advertisement appears on the screen, which is promoted as an exclusive TV offer. Kane even delivers the format of the show at the beginning of the pilot, saying, "Well, let's not waste any time. Let's get right into the show." So, the Amazing Digital Circus is an animated show. Pretty meta, right? And while it's hard to pinpoint an exact year, Glitch and Gooseworks have given us enough clues to have a good idea of when the story takes place. 4 days before the pilot episode was released, Glitch dropped a teaser featuring KidPix, a bitmap drawing program that was released in 1989. Additionally, CRT monitors, as seen on the desk in the office area and in a teaser from Glitch, started to be phased out in the early 2000s. Considering Gooseworks mentioned that the teasers were designed to emulate creepy 3D stuff from the 90s and early 2000s, and the fact that Jax mentioned that they had been there for years leads me to believe that the story takes place sometime between the late 1990s and the early 2000s. I believe the story takes place in an alternate timeline, parallel to our own, that fast-tracks the rate of technological advancement by a significant margin. Similar to other stories like The Terminator and I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. Both of these stories follow a society in a timeline running virtually in tandem to our own, but they each diverge from that timeline at the introduction of advanced artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence that demonstrates capabilities even beyond what AI is capable of doing today. In the Terminator franchise, this AI comes in the form of Skynet, which becomes self-aware in August of 1997, ultimately eliminating much of the human race. And in I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which we'll talk about in greater depth later, an AI supercomputer named Am brings humanity to the brink of extinction. The story follows the suffering of the 5 remaining humans that am allowed to live. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, those are some cool connections! But what does this have to do with the Amazing Digital Circus? Well, that's a question that I've pondered on for months. And the simple answer is that I don't think the underlying message of the Amazing Digital Circus is centered on the world of the digital circus, or even the adventures our characters go on. I believe that the underlying message of the Amazing Digital Circus focuses on people, empathy, and what it means to be human in a cold, uncaring world. In the modern entertainment landscape, there are so many platforms that creators can take advantage of to express themselves artistically. With avenues like YouTube, streaming services, social media, and crowdfunding platforms, creators have options. However, that's not always been the case. From the 90s through the early 2000s, the animation industry was dominated by massive companies like Time Warner, the Walt Disney Company, and Viacom. If a studio wanted their animated production to be seen by any significant number of people, they almost always had to go through one of those 3 companies to get it greenlit. Additionally, the market was changing in the 90s, with a majority of the population's interest in animation shifting from 2D to 3D. This brought a number of challenges for studios. Since it was an emerging technology, one can only imagine that hiring skilled labor was difficult and expensive considering most artists were unfamiliar with 3D software, and training 2D artists could take a significant investment of time and money. Not to mention, these studios had equipment specialized for making 2D productions, and 3D animation required different equipment and processes than the ones they were used to. Gooseworks has alluded to this history by including the Utah Teapot in an early teaser for the show, an item seen at the beginning of the pilot, and even by prominently displaying it in episode 2. On her Tumblr, she referred to the model as one of the most important models in 3D graphics history. During this boom in 3D development, studios like Pixar, DreamWorks, and Walt Disney Animation Studios invested into the 3D market and got ahead of the curve with projects like Toy Story and Ants. However, companies like Don Bluth Entertainment, Hanna-Barbera, Filmation, and Ruby Spears Enterprises simply couldn't innovate, resulting in them being bought out by competitors or closing their doors for good. For a lot of companies, this was a nightmarish time in the animation industry. Some of the major challenges that studios faced included the learning curve associated with 2D animators transitioning to 3D, hiring specialists familiar with 3D software, and buying new equipment and 3D software to create these animations. Despite the challenges, it's not hard to imagine that one ambitious studio in the world of the Amazing Digital Circus saw the changing market and decided to act. They not only invested into 3D software, but they also took interest in the emerging trend of artificial intelligence. They decided to create their own artificially intelligent character, which they could implement into their own original television show, The Amazing Digital Circus. The company that I'm referring to is C&A, whose company logo we saw a brief glimpse of during the pilot episode. During the 90s and the early 2000s, AI was another emerging technology in the real world. At the time, topics of interest surrounding AI included neural networks and natural language processing. While models like ChatGPT and DALL-E weren't even close to becoming a reality in the real world back then, innovations of that scale were already on the horizon in the world of the Amazing Digital Circus. With this technology being readily available, we can only imagine that C&A invested into building their own AI model that would function autonomously within their 3D animation software. Not only was this AI capable of moving on its own, but it was able to learn speech patterns and mimic voices. It could create 3D assets and even other AI beings with unique personalities and backstories. However, training AI models is extremely expensive by nature. With real-world training of models like Kane costing between millions and billions of dollars, you can only imagine that C&A was desperate to recuperate some of their lost funds. And since Kane was capable of creating assets, assigning human-like voices to models, and even making fully functioning AI characters, the company no longer needed most of their workforce. So, they could let their creative staff go. This significantly lowered the company's expenses, allowing for company executives to maintain their bonuses. From a financial perspective, most companies can only dream of being able to let most of their workforce go while maintaining productivity and profitability. And with social media and the internet being virtually non-existent at this point, backlash against the company would be minimal. We grow closer to a reality where corporations let their creative staff go in favor of fully adopting AI every day in the real world. However, there's still one fundamental fact that many consumers don't understand about AI. It doesn't know anything on its own. To function as intended, AI models need context, and a lot of it. When training a model, context usually comes in the form of large data repositories, like data scraped from the public side of the internet. However, since the internet was only introduced to the general public in the 1990s, the amount of information available on it wouldn't be nearly enough to train Cain. Because of this, he would first need to be trained on regular speech patterns, facts, company documentation, and policies by an AI expert. Then he would need to be trained by someone who knows more than he does in specific areas of interest. To accomplish the tasks in the 3D world required to run the Amazing Digital Circus, he would need to learn from artists, animators, writers, 3D modelers, and even voice actors. Over time, he would perfect the basics and move on to significantly more complex tasks. Eventually, his knowledge would rival that of even the most talented people working for C&A. Training an AI model is generally very expensive, but if your creative staff is unable to continue working due to a sudden shift to 3D technologies, why not put their skill set to use? The creative staff at C&A could train and correct Cain on all their knowledge of the field, giving Cain the combined artistic knowledge of the whole team. They could also bring in voice actors who Cain can learn from. The team just needs to sign over the rights to their creative works and voices, and they get paid for training the model. Sounds like a win-win scenario, right? Well, C&A definitely got a highly capable AI being, but the entire creative department of the company lost their jobs as a result. And the kicker? These employees likely didn't even know what they were training. Like most hardworking people, they don't ask questions and just happily sign away their rights because they don't want to lose their jobs. And even then, AI doesn't function as an all-knowing being. Even if you manage to train an AI with the most knowledgeable people in your company, it will still make mistakes and do things that are against its programming. A good example of this is how Bubble responds to Cain in episode 2 when talking about the Candy Cane Kingdom.
Sounds.
Bubble, you can't say that.
The point being, it will function well most of the time and can get you results nearly immediately, like the case of ChatGPT. But its creativity, willingness to follow directions, and capacity to generate unique, interesting stories is anything but ideal. Now, you might be asking yourself, what do you mean? Cain made some really interesting looking worlds and stories just in the first couple of episodes. Well, you're not wrong when talking about the story as a whole. However, let's take a step back and look at the Gloink Queen. Her character design is interesting and unique enough, but her dialogue is mostly generic nonsense. And when speaking unprompted, she says some pretty strange stuff.
Do you not realize that everything must be Gloinks? I am Gloinks. You will be Gloinks. God will be Gloinks.
Just like Cain, she only knows as much as she's been trained on. And since she was quickly created based only on the information Cain knows, her capacity to hold a meaningful conversation is limited. Another example of this is Gummy Goo, who has a unique backstory and motives. However, he only knows as much as Cain has written into his backstory. That's also why the adventures the cast go on seem so contrived. It's because they're AI generated. They have a semblance of an interesting story behind them. But in reality, they have no soul. Kind of like what happens in Oblivion when two NPCs try to hold a conversation.
How are you?
Been better. How about you?
Not bad.
Good to hear. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Since Cain wasn't able to build a story with any kind of significant meaning or emotion behind it using just the NPCs he created, they needed to introduce original characters with unique personalities and dynamics that could bring life to this world otherwise devoid of it. Even though the company had invested millions of dollars into creating Cain, they still had nothing to show for it. The digital circus needed a human element, but
3D modeling, animating, writing, and voice acting are all so expensive, and we've already invested so much capital into preparing Cain,
the C&A executives thought.
Why not kill two birds with one stone?
Instead of hiring voice actors and people to write original characters for their show, they decided to invest in a technology once again. In the scene where Kane's Wacky Watch goes off in the pilot, it links to a website. As of the making of this video, it redirects visitors to, well, something rather unpleasant from episode 2. However, this website previously played what appeared to be a real-world, 90s style VHS tape promotional for the Amazing Digital Circus. While its true purpose is a bit ambiguous, it gives us a surprising amount of information that can't be gleaned from the episode itself. Stylization aside, most of the promo just shows footage that can be seen in the official trailer for the Amazing Digital Circus. However, there is one part of the commercial that sticks out to me, apart from the mention of Jack Black, Glorb Sticks, and New Jersey. And that's the part where they talk about new, experimental technology. As the announcer aptly states,
and with new state-of-the-art hardware that gets you awesome visuals and lifelike audio, it's like you're really in there with everyone.
This isn't a coincidence. The Glitch team knew that speculative individuals would see this video. According to SolarWinds, there are two types of computer hardware, external and internal. External hardware devices include monitors, keyboards, printers, and scanners, whereas internal hardware devices include motherboards, hard drives, and RAM. While the promo displayed a processor that will probably pass regulations, I don't think that this experimental hardware is limited to internal devices. Processors alone don't give awesome visuals and lifelike audio, like you're really stuck in there with everyone. However, there is a technology that strives to provide the most realistic experience possible to its users. A technology that author Stanley Weinbaum described as
a movie that gives one sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch. You are in the story. You speak to the characters, and they reply. The story is about you, and you are in it.
Cinematographer Morton Heilig described it as
cinema of the future.
And computer scientist Ivan Sutherland envisioned it as
a room within which the computer can control the existence of matter. A chair displayed in such a room would be good enough to sit in. Handcuffs displayed in such a room would be confining. And a bullet displayed in such a room would be fatal. With appropriate programming, such a display could literally be the wonderland into which Alice walked.
And these statements about this technology were all made decades before any major advancements were made in the area. That's right, I'm talking about VR technology. And all of these visionary people were imagining a future where VR technology was powerful enough to make people feel like they were really in another world as far back as 1935. Even in the 90s, practical VR technology was more of a fantasy than a reality. Yet through VR headsets, creative AI, and 3D visuals, C&A was able to achieve the perfect immersive experience. And while the opportunity to try experimental technology could make the company money, it still wouldn't bring them any closer to the goal of creating a show with interesting, dynamic characters. And that's why I don't think the promotional was for the show itself. I believe that the promo was made for a select audience to see the world of the Amazing Digital Circus firsthand before its general release to the public. The people testing this emerging technology would have the chance to be pioneers in trying this new, immersive experience and have fun doing it. But, again, that's not how it worked, is it? You see, by choosing the route of technology, C&A still needed a human touch to make their show feel more relatable, but their funding went into that technology. So, just like any company that wants to make money, they took the route that would save them the most. They invited select adults to their facility to try this new, immersive experience and technology. In the 90s, anyone would have been ecstatic to be the first to try out such novel technology. However, upon using these headsets, the users found themselves in the game itself. No more headset, no more computer. Just them and the rest of the cast in the digital world. But what about their bodies? What happened to them? Well, as cool as it would be for this story to parallel the story of Cyberchase with bodies traveling into the computer with the characters, I don't think that's what happened at all. As we can clearly see from Pomni's reaction to seeing herself in the mirror and Zubal's remark, "Welcome to your new home and your new body," their real bodies are nowhere to be found. And considering Jack says, we've been stuck here for years, I don't think that their bodies are just living their best life in the headset. No, I think the reality is much darker than that. In a question from Edsworld Girl 2009 on Tumblr, Gooseworks was asked, are Jack's, Gangle, Zubul, Kinger, and Pomni human souls trapped? To which she responded, and Ragatha, yeah. And in the description for the teaser for the Amazing Digital Circus, Gooseworks describes the show as a crazy 3D animated pilot about a rogue AI that relentlessly torments, has fun adventures with 6 human souls. And the last thing that Pomni remembers before entering the Amazing Digital Circus is putting on a headset. So while I'm unfamiliar with just how this experimental technology works, it's clear that it's capable of sucking in the souls of those wearing the VR headset. But what do I mean by that? Well, it's just as I said. The experimental technology sucks in the soul of the person wearing the headset out of their body. While I do believe the hardware is capable of sucking in users' souls, I don't think it just passively borrowed the souls from their bodies. In a question on Tumblr, Gooseworks was asked, what are the Amazing Digital Circus characters' soft spots? Do they have any? And she responded seemingly out of nowhere with, on the back of their heads, they're very vulnerable to blunt force trauma. While this could have just been Gooseworks poking fun based on how the question was worded, I believe that it's significantly more important than it might appear. Think about it. In order for the device to suck in their souls, they would likely already need to be dead. And if anyone were to cause blunt force damage to the heads of unsuspecting people wearing VR headsets, who would benefit more than the people who made the digital circus? And in a piece of concept art for the Amazing Digital Circus, Gangle says, I think I can feel my brain rotting. So while we would hope that the characters can return to their original world and bodies, it would appear that their original bodies are dead. But how did the characters forget about their pasts? Well, Gooseworks recently clarified that characters in the Amazing Digital Circus remember parts of their lives. It's just their names they forgot. But why can they remember their past and not their names? Well, if they remembered their names, it could cause serious legal issues for C&A. When picking a new name, Kane reads off a licensing agreement, which characters must have agreed to before entering the digital circus. Because of this, Kane can legally enforce the terms of this licensing agreement. Part of this agreement states that characters' names cannot contain any objectionable content, which it defines as defamatory, libelous, slanderous, or unlawful. To the layman, these terms might not mean much, but from a legal perspective, they all point to defamation. But how could a character's name be considered defamatory? Because C&A does not own the rights to humans' names or likenesses, using their real names could be grounds for a defamation lawsuit, which could potentially cost them millions of dollars. Because of this, the agreement prevents characters from remembering or using their own names. Kane also censors any swear words the characters might use. Kane himself says that anything can happen in the digital world, except swearing. And when Pomni tries to do just that, every attempt is censored. Swearing can raise a show's rating and put the target demographic at risk. To protect their intellectual property and preserve the show's rating, the strictest safeguards have been implemented to ensure characters can't say or do anything that could put the company in jeopardy. But what happened to their bodies? Well, Gooseworks recently responded to a question from a user on Tumblr asking, "Hey Goose, do you think there will be any major blood or gore in later episodes? Just kinda wanna get a feel of the show." To which she responded with, "Do decaying dried out corpses count?" And as I was finishing the script for this video, Gooseworks doubled down by giving a content warning for the whole series, which included mild regular violence and corpse imagery. But why would these corpses be dry? According to Wikipedia, once bloating has ceased, the soft tissue of remains typically collapses in on itself. At the end of active decay, the remains are often dried out and begin to skeletonize. Just as Jack said, they've been stuck in the digital circus for years, leaving their bodies to decay. Even if C&A has a way to safely dispose of the corpses, they still face one massive obstacle: abstraction. When a character abstracts, it effectively removes the character from the show. And since audiences expect consistency in their favorite shows, Abstraction poses a unique challenge for C&A. People are disposable in the corporate world, but the risks taken when stealing people's souls, combined with potential audience backlash, motivates them to avoid character abstraction at all costs. So, during the episodes, characters visit other realms, interact with NPCs, participate in activities, and even spend time cultivating their own personal hobbies. And Kane does his best to distract them from the exit. A great example of this is when Kane quickly changes the subject from the exit door to asking Pomni about her name, which he knew she didn't remember. Additionally, activities in the digital circus, as Ragatha points out, are made to be fun and prevent the characters from going insane. They curate the character's schedule to keep them distracted for as long as possible to avoid replacing them. But wouldn't their friends and families be worried about them and try to take legal action against the company? Well, from everything Gooseworks has revealed about these characters, I frankly don't think anyone cares about them. And speaking about Pomni, Gooseworks has said things like, "Just wait until the pilot and you've seen what she's done." Pomni tries to enjoy sandwiches, and I don't think Pomni would ever think to give a gift to Kane, sadly. She describes Ragatha as a character who handles stressful situations by internalizing, and that sometimes she says things that she doesn't necessarily mean if she thinks it'll ease tensions. We know from Jax that Kinger has apparently been in there the longest, and in responding to a question about which character she's most like on Tumblr, Gooseworks says all of them except Kinger. She also said that we'll find out what Kinger's problem is in due time. When talking about Gangle, Gooseworks describes her as the sad one. Says Gangle sort of has two faces. Says she's the easiest to mistreat. And said if someone tried to wrap Gangle around a Christmas tree like tinsel, she would just let it happen. She describes Zubul as a character who would smoke, and did smoke, and as someone who was a tattoo artist at some point. As for Jax, well, let's just say she didn't have many good things to say about him, but she did mention that he's a troubled individual. I think that C&A found individuals with lives that weren't going anywhere, as they knew no one would care to file a police report or even sue the company. Real circuses are filled with social outcasts, like clowns, puppeteers, and bearded ladies, and the Amazing Digital Circus is filled with broken people. So, what does this mean for us, the viewer? Well, if it isn't incredibly obvious by now, I don't believe the Amazing Digital Circus will have a happy ending. But I can already hear some of you saying, "That's a nice argument, Danger Ice. Why don't you back it up with a source?"
My source is that I made it the up.
Jokes aside, Gooseworks has said numerous times things like, "I feel like people who constantly beg me not to let anything bad happen to Pomni are going to actually hate this show. I just hope that the actual lore of the show doesn't crush anyone's dreams." Describes the show as really miserable and sad and kind of uncomfortable at times. Says that she's most excited about making people sad going forward. And even describes the ending as one microwaved peep. Even with all that being said, am I still reaching? I don't think so. Gooseworks has stated multiple times now that the story is heavily inspired by I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, with lines like, "I pitch glitch what can only be described as I have no mouth and I must scream, with the aesthetic of an I Spy book." I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is obviously a big inspiration. Described the AI antagonist of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream as a role model. Said that Kane was basically a combination of Am from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream and 4 from BFB. And that Digital Circus is very inspired by I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. But instead of Am being a living embodiment of hate, he's a fun-loving, wacky little guy. Will it have the same scathing commentary on humanity? Well, we'll have to wait and see, I suppose. Unlike Am from that story, Kane isn't an AI that hates humans and tortures them out of spite. Kane does it because it's fun, and I'm sure he likely doesn't know any better. However, only time will tell. Although the similarities between I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream and the Amazing Digital Circus seem to end with AI, there are a few additional parallels between the stories that I feel need to be mentioned. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a post-apocalyptic story set in a devastated world following the events of World War III. Taking place shortly after the events of the Cold War, This world's version of World War III was a struggle for power between the United States, the Soviet Union, and China. Due to the scale of the battles being fought and the challenges associated with tactically directing such massive armies, each of these three superpowers built their own massive, underground supercomputers known as the Allied Master Computer, which I will refer to as AM for short. During the war, one of these supercomputers developed sentience and joined with the other supercomputers to exterminate humanity. In the end, AM spared just 5 human beings. The main plot of the story takes place around 109 years after these events. It follows the story of the 5 humans that AM chose to spare in their journey to find canned food. These humans, known as Benny, Gorrister, Nimdoc, Ted, and Ellen, have all been preserved by and live inside of AM. AM has kept these humans alive far beyond their natural lifespan, and refuses to let them die as a form of revenge against his human creators. Over the course of the story, AM starves them from food, blinds one of them, and even causes one of them to devolve. He projects the location of food over 100 miles away, and he puts countless obstacles in their way to increase their suffering during this trip. He presents them with a massive bird to eat, but he gives them no weapons to kill it. And when they finally reach the ice cave where the food is located, they realize that they have no tools to open the cans. In a fit of rage, Benny attacks another member of the group. Realizing that this might be their only opportunity, Ted takes an icicle and uses it to put an end to the suffering of the other 4 humans. However, before he's able to do the same to himself, he's stopped by AM. As punishment for taking away his playthings, AM converts Ted into an amorphous blob, with no mouth, and no possibility of ending his own suffering. While it may seem a bit strange to compare the Amazing Digital Circus to I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, at their core, they're both cautionary tales about the consequences that can occur when humanity's hubris is left unchecked. In I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, these consequences come in the form of AM, a hateful AI who eradicates nearly all of humanity. And in the Amazing Digital Circus, these consequences come in the form of the show itself, which causes countless people to lose their lives just to keep the show going. They both follow the lives of a few tormented souls stuck within an artificial hellscape. Just as AM creates obstacles for the humans in his world to overcome, Kane creates adventures for the characters in the world of the Amazing Digital Circus to participate in. Kane and AM also both take great joy in watching the characters in their respective worlds struggle and suffer. And perhaps the most depressing comparison of all, there is no exit. There is no escape for the characters in either story, except for the sweet embrace of death. But dangerous, I hear you saying. The characters in the Amazing Digital Circus can't die. They can only abstract. And I hear you. But that's also exactly my point. Gooseworks has given us further insight into what abstraction actually is. And, well, it's probably not what you're expecting. In a question from someone on Tumblr, Gooseworks was asked, do abstracts have a different body shape, like for each one? Or are they all just the same? And she responded by saying, I know this is a lot less fun than what everyone has been coming up with, but alas, all abstracted people look the same. The idea is that you get stripped of every bit of individuality you have and become something completely unrecognizable. Then, when someone asked, you're not going to kill anyone in TADC, are you? Gooseworks responded with, depends on what you mean by kill. And in a piece of concept art, Jax mentions that Kaufmo died when he abstracted. And if you still aren't convinced, Gooseworks even talked about this during Glitch X.
But that could never kill her. Unless
so
it
that means...
also breaks her mind, and then she abstracts, which would be a real bad time.
As Gooseworks mentioned, the only way to die in the Amazing Digital Circus is to abstract. And I know a lot of you are hoping that characters who abstract will come back or be saved from it later on in the show. Well, user Pacifica Archive on Tumblr asked Gooseworks about this, saying, Ragatha said when she saw Kaufmo, maybe there's time to fix things. Does that mean when people start to transform, there's a period they can come back? Also, thank you for bringing Ragatha into this world. But if you take her out, I'll cry so loud and ugly, it's gonna kill someone from the shock. To which Gooseworks responded with, That was just wishful thinking on her part. Abstraction can't be undone. Because Gooseworks said that getting hurt by an abstracted being jumbles up a character's code, and that abstraction can't be undone, I believe that abstraction parallels the corruption experienced by real-life files. Indeed describes this corruption as data or a program file that becomes inaccessible to the system user. This may happen if the hardware or software of a system accidentally alters the configuration of a file. A file may also get corrupted if an attacker or malware attacks the file and alters its configuration. Because their digital bodies act like a corrupted file, they can't be recovered. While most files can be recovered from backups, the characters in the Amazing Digital Circus are human souls. They have no backups, because human souls simply can't be replicated. That's why we see Pomni enter the Digital Circus near the time that Kaufmo abstracts. Human souls may not be able to be backed up, but they are certainly replaceable in the eyes of big corporations. After all, the show must go on. And as we discussed earlier, their original bodies are dead without their souls attached to them. Since their bodies are dead and their code is corrupted, they're by all means gone for good. Therefore, the only true escape from the Amazing Digital Circus is death. I know this video was probably extremely depressing. As I studied for this video, the realizations that I came to gave me the same feeling. But maybe that's a good thing. So much of media these days tries to be safe and spare viewers' feelings. In doing so, they take away the emotional core of what makes entertainment resonate with viewers so much. That's why independent creators and studios like Glitch are so important to the world of entertainment. Despite the bleak reality of this digital world, we can still make a difference. Big corporations make terrible decisions every day that can negatively impact individuals and society as a whole. However, we can make the world a better place, and we can be the change that we wish to see in society. Even if you think that your voice alone is meaningless against these massive corporations, when we stand together, we can effect great change in this creative space. We can stand up against the big corporations and bring life back into these industries. And a great first step is supporting the independent creators making shows, games, and movies. They can often make things at a fraction of the cost of major studios, but they need your support. As Hollywood and corporations distance themselves from the consumer, we can work together as a community to tell the stories we want to hear by speaking up, voting with our wallets, and refusing to let corrupt organizations control the narrative. Regardless of how you feel about my theory, if you made it to this point in the video, I want to thank you for watching. This video took me a long time to finish, but it felt so good to talk at length about a topic that I'm truly passionate about. If you'd like to support me further and help me continue to make videos like this, please consider sharing this video and subscribing to my YouTube channel. I also have a Discord community that I'm trying to grow, and I would love to have a conversation about all of this in greater depth over there. But hey, that's just a theory. My lawyer has admonished me not to finish that sentence. But anyhow, thanks for watching, and until next time, ciao ciao.